Germany just detonated the most consequential economic bomb ever aimed at the American economy by a close ally. A total of 23 major German corporations representing over $200 billion in active United States investments formally notified the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs on February 18th that they are initiating coordinated withdrawal of capital from American markets, American factories, and American supply chains, beginning immediately. And this isn't routine portfolio rebalancing or temporary hedging. This is a deliberate, coordinated economic decoupling triggered by Trump administration trade policies that German industry leaders are now describing in writing as structurally hostile to German enterprise. When the CEO of Volkswagen, the CEO of Siemens, and the chairman of Deutsche Bank signed the same letter calling U.S. market conditions untenable, you know the economic alliance between the two largest NATO economies just fractured beyond easy repair. Hit that subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss any of the videos I release. So what triggered this unprecedented German corporate revolt? According to multiple sources inside the German Foreign Ministry and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the final trigger was the Trump administration's announcement on February 14th of a new 35% tariff on European manufactured goods, effective March 1st, the steepest trade barrier imposed on a NATO partner since the Smoot-Hawley Act of 1930. Sources familiar with internal German government communications say the evidence of deliberate economic hostility includes confidential White House briefing documents, internal EU trade monitoring data, and sworn testimony from 4 American trade attorneys who advise German companies that the regulatory environment has become systematically unpredictable. This isn't just another trade dispute driven by tactical negotiation or temporary political signaling. Economic historians are calling this the most serious rupture in the U.S.-Germany economic relationship since the Marshall Plan was signed in 1948. And believe me, when German industrial leaders who spent decades building American factories and employing American workers now describe the United States as an unreliable economic partner, something catastrophic has broken inside the transatlantic alliance. Here's the full picture of what's been unfolding. Tensions have been building since October 2024 when the U.S. Trade Representative's Office launched a broad Section 232 national security review targeting German automotive imports, German pharmaceutical supply chains, and German industrial machinery. But everything exploded on February 11th when Chancellor Friedrich Merz received a classified economic security briefing from Germany's Federal Intelligence Service that described a coordinated pattern of U.S. regulatory actions designed, according to the assessment, to systematically disadvantage foreign direct investment from European Union member states in favor of domestic American production. The briefing, conducted in the Chancellery's secure conference suite by Director of the BND Bruno Kohl and Federal Finance Minister Lars Klingbeil, lasted 3 hours and left senior German officials visibly shaken, according to staffers who were present. According to senior German officials who spoke to journalists afterward, the briefing detailed a pattern of conduct spanning 5 months where the Trump administration had selectively applied environmental regulations, delayed import certification approvals, and accelerated antitrust investigations specifically targeting German-owned subsidiaries operating in the United States. Actions that Treasury economists inside Germany's finance ministry calculated had cost German companies an estimated $14 billion in lost American revenue since September 2024. The intelligence presented reportedly included documented regulatory decisions, financial impact assessments, and formal legal opinions from 3 separate German-American law firms advising their clients that the situation had crossed from political friction into systematic economic targeting. What makes this particularly explosive is the nature of what Germany is pulling out. According to Bundesbank President Joachim Nagel, who issued a formal statement on February 17th, the $200 billion figure represents not just financial instruments but physical capital, factories in Ohio, Tennessee, and South Carolina, research facilities in California and Texas, and distribution networks employing an estimated 72,000 American workers. This wasn't about financial markets fluctuating or investment portfolios being rebalanced. This was about the physical economic infrastructure of the American heartland being placed under direct review for potential shutdown by its foreign owners. Smash that like button if this is making sense so far. Here's where it really gets serious. Within 48 hours of the classified German security briefing, Chancellor Friedrich Merz convened an emergency meeting of what German media has since called the Wirtschaftsrat Krisenausschuss, the Economic Council Crisis Committee, in the Chancellery's secure conference wing. According to senior German government officials who later spoke on background, 23 corporate leaders attended that meeting, including Volkswagen CEO Oliver Blume, Siemens AG CEO Roland Busch, Deutsche Bank Chairman Christian Sewing, BASF CEO Markus Kamieth, BMW Group CEO Oliver Zipse, Bayer AG CEO Bill Anderson, and Allianz CEO Oliver Bäte. The meeting lasted 4 hours, and what happened inside, according to multiple participants who described it to German financial journalists, was characterized as the most consequential gathering of German industrial leadership since the post-reunification economic summits of 1992. Chancellor Merz opened the meeting by stating plainly, according to sources who recounted his remarks, "We have built a $200 billion presence in the American economy over 4 decades. We employed their workers, we paid their taxes, we built their factories. The current administration has responded by treating our presence as a problem to be solved rather than a partnership to be honored. We cannot remain in a market where the regulatory ground shifts beneath us by executive order. The decision we make in this room today will define Germany's economic posture toward the United States for the next generation." The room fell silent. Oliver Blume, whose Volkswagen operates one of America's largest automotive manufacturing plants in Chattanooga, Tennessee, reportedly stood and said, his voice steady and measured according to witnesses, "I have defended investing in America through every political cycle for 15 years. I have argued to our supervisory board that American political turbulence was temporary and that the structural advantages of the American market were permanent. I can no longer make that argument. The 35% tariff on European manufactured goods combined with the selective regulatory targeting we have documented makes continued American investment economically indefensible. Volkswagen will initiate a structured withdrawal." According to participants present, Blume's statement ended any remaining debate in the room. Christian Sewing of Deutsche Bank, who oversees the largest European financial institution operating in the United States, reportedly added, "The financial exposure is irrefutable. We have modeled this across every scenario. At 35% tariffs with the current regulatory environment, German operations in the United States generate negative returns on invested capital within 18 months. If we do not act now, we are not being cautious. We are being reckless with shareholder capital and employee livelihoods." Drop a comment right now if you saw this coming. I read every single one. Now things get absolutely explosive. By midnight on February 17th, the assembled corporate leaders had drafted a formal joint letter to the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs, formally notifying the government of their intention to initiate coordinated capital withdrawal. An extraordinary step, given that German corporations of this scale virtually never coordinate public economic action of this nature. It runs directly counter to Germany's tradition of quiet industrial diplomacy. But according to Chancellor Merz, who addressed the German Bundestag the following morning, the circumstances were extraordinary. German industry has exhausted every channel of quiet diplomatic engagement. We have met with U.S. Treasury officials. We have engaged the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We have sent legal representations through proper trade dispute channels. We have received in return 35% tariffs and accelerated antitrust reviews of our American subsidiaries. The federal government supports the decision of German industry to protect German capital and German jobs. The joint letter released publicly on February 18th contains 3 formal declarations. The first declares intent to withdraw active investment commitments totaling $127 billion from planned American expansion projects effective immediately. The second declares intent to initiate structured operational review of existing American subsidiaries employing 72,000 American workers with a formal 90-day assessment period. The third declares the suspension of all new German foreign direct investment in the United States pending a fundamental reassessment of the regulatory and trade environment. But the truly devastating component of the letter is its appendix. The letter references a classified economic dossier prepared by Germany's Bundesbank that documents 47 separate instances between September 2024 and February 2025 where German-owned American subsidiaries experienced what the dossier terms coordinated regulatory interference inconsistent with good faith trade partnership. One passage of the letter states, "On November 3, 2024, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency initiated simultaneous compliance reviews of 7 BASF-owned chemical facilities across 4 states. The reviews were initiated on the same day, targeting the same parent company under regulatory frameworks that had not been applied to equivalent American-owned facilities in the preceding 36 months. Another passage details financial impact. Between October 2024 and January 2025, German-owned automotive suppliers operating in Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee experienced an average 23-week delay in import certification approvals for European manufactured components, delays averaging 4 times longer than those experienced by Japanese and South Korean competitors operating equivalent supply chains. This move sent shockwaves through Washington and every major American financial center. When the CEO of Volkswagen and the CEO of Siemens and the chairman of Deutsche Bank signed the same letter using language like coordinated regulatory interference and economically indefensible, the calculation about the real cost of Trump's trade policies has completely and catastrophically shifted. This isn't the first time European allies have pushed back against American trade policy. During Trump's first term, the European Union imposed retaliatory tariffs on American bourbon, Harley-Davidson motorcycles, and agricultural goods. American producers complained. Diplomatic channels activated. The dispute eventually found resolution through negotiated accommodation. Both sides preserved the fundamental relationship. Then came the renewed steel and aluminum tariffs in 2024. Several European nations filed formal WTO dispute complaints. German automakers publicly expressed concern, but the response stopped at formal diplomatic protest. Corporate investment continued. The relationship held. Now it's completely different. This withdrawal is initiated by German corporations themselves, not the German government. The decision involves physical capital, factories and research facilities and distribution networks, not just financial instruments. The commitment involves 72,000 American jobs at direct risk, and 23 of Germany's largest corporations have already committed to withdrawal, with trade associations representing an additional 140 mid-sized companies announcing parallel reviews. The pattern is clear. Germany weathered previous Trump trade provocations through institutional restraint and quiet diplomatic engagement. But when 35% tariffs arrive simultaneously with documented selective regulatory targeting, even decades of invested partnership have limits. Subscribe immediately if you haven't yet. This content doesn't exist anywhere else. So what exactly triggered this mass German corporate defection? According to German government officials, European trade analysts, and American industry sources familiar with the situation, 3 specific developments proved dispositive. First, the February 14th 35% tariff announcement itself. The Office of the U.S. Trade Representative published the formal tariff schedule at 11:47 p.m. on Valentine's Day with a 15-day implementation window. According to Dr. Guntram Wolff, senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics in Washington, who analyzed the tariff structure publicly, this isn't a negotiating tactic. The tariff schedule as written applies specifically to finished manufactured goods categories dominated by German exports: automotive, industrial machinery, precision instruments, pharmaceutical compounds. American manufactured goods in the same categories face no equivalent treatment. This is targeted economic pressure, not broad trade policy. Second, the documented pattern of selective regulatory interference. The Bundesbank's classified dossier, portions of which were described to German media, identifies 47 instances across 18 months where German-owned American subsidiaries faced regulatory actions not applied to comparable American-owned or Asian-owned competitors. According to Hans-Werner Sinn, former president of the IFO Institute for Economic Research in Munich and one of Europe's most respected economists, who published a public analysis on February 19th. The statistical probability of 47 simultaneous industry-coordinated regulatory actions being random is effectively 0. This is economic policy by regulatory instrument. The Trump administration appears to be using the regulatory state as a trade weapon in ways that violate the spirit, if not the letter, of WTO agreements. Here's the absolute kicker. The third piece of evidence involves internal Trump administration communications that were described to multiple German government officials through back-channel intelligence sharing among NATO partners. 3 separate European intelligence services, including Germany's BND, reportedly obtained independent confirmation of internal White House discussions from late 2024, in which senior Trump economic advisors explicitly framed German corporate presence in the American manufacturing sector as a vulnerability to be leveraged in trade negotiations, rather than as an economic benefit to be preserved. One European diplomatic cable, portions of which were described to German journalists by 2 senior government officials, reportedly quotes a senior U.S. economic official as stating in a White House meeting, "The Germans have $200 billion parked in our economy. That's not a partnership, that's a hostage we haven't used yet." Don't go anywhere. The most explosive part is coming next. And here's what should alarm everyone, regardless of political affiliation. This isn't just about Germany or this specific trade dispute. If a president of the United States can treat the physical economic presence of America's closest allies as leverage to be weaponized rather than as evidence of successful partnership to be preserved, then every foreign company operating in the United States, employing American workers, paying American taxes, building American factories, must calculate that their presence is subject to confiscation by regulatory action at any moment. Once that precedent is fully established, future waves of foreign direct investment that have historically created millions of American jobs will simply go elsewhere. The manufacturing renaissance that American policy across administrations has spent 2 decades trying to build doesn't survive that precedent. This puts the Trump administration in an absolutely impossible economic and diplomatic position. On one side, the administration faces the withdrawal of $200 billion in active investment, the potential loss of 72,000 American manufacturing jobs, and the rupture of the most economically important bilateral relationship in the NATO alliance, all happening in real time with a 90-day clock ticking. On the other side, the administration confronts documented evidence of selective regulatory targeting that European trade lawyers describe as indefensible before any neutral international arbitration panel. And here's the impossible bind. If the Trump administration claims the regulatory actions against German subsidiaries were routine enforcement unrelated to trade pressure, it directly contradicts the documented pattern. 47 simultaneous actions targeting the same parent companies across multiple regulatory agencies in the same 18-month window. A pattern that German, British, and French economic analysts all independently describe as statistically implausible as coincidence. If the administration admits the regulatory pressure was intentional, but claims it was legitimate trade negotiation leverage, it faces the legal reality that using domestic regulatory enforcement as a covert trade weapon violates World Trade Organization commitments that the United States has treaty obligations to honor, opening the administration to formal international trade dispute liability, estimated by WTO legal experts at potentially $80 billion in permissible European retaliatory tariffs. If the administration argues that the tariffs and regulatory pressure represent legitimate protection of American industry, it still faces the economic evidence that the 72,000 American workers employed by these German companies are the American workers it claims to be protecting, workers who now face potential unemployment as a direct consequence of the policies designed to protect them. There's no defense strategy that addresses all 3 pieces of evidence simultaneously. Constitutional scholars and trade economists are calling this the most serious self-inflicted wound to American economic credibility in the post-war era. Dr. Laura Tyson, former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors under President Clinton, and now distinguished professor at UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business, stated on CNBC, "The economic literature on foreign direct investment is unambiguous. Foreign companies building factories and creating jobs in the United States are a net positive for American workers and American communities. The administration has chosen to treat this as a threat rather than an asset, and Germany is responding rationally to that choice. The damage to American credibility as an investment destination will outlast any individual presidency." Former U.S. Trade Representative Michael Froman, who served under President Obama and negotiated the Trans-Pacific Partnership, told Bloomberg Television, "I have been in trade negotiations for 20 years. I have never seen an allied government coordinate a corporate withdrawal at this scale. This isn't retaliatory tariffs. This is Germany's industrial establishment voting with its capital. When Volkswagen and Siemens and Deutsche Bank act together, they are speaking for German industry as a whole. Washington should treat this as the institutional alarm bell it is." Even former Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, who served in Trump's first administration and has consistently defended the administration's economic approach, acknowledged in a Wall Street Journal interview, "The scale of what Germany is doing is a serious signal that warrants a serious response. I believe in America First trade policy, but $200 billion in investment and 72,000 jobs are American workers and American economic activity. Losing that to prove a point about tariffs is not a winning trade." Do me a favor and slam that like button because it genuinely helps this video reach more people. So, let's break down what this means. First, immediate economic chaos in the American manufacturing sector. The 90-day review clock Germany announced means that by mid-May 2025, decisions about the operational future of German-owned factories in Ohio, Tennessee, South Carolina, California, and Texas will be finalized. state governors in manufacturing-dependent states are already in emergency contact with German corporate offices. The governors of Tennessee and South Carolina, both Republican states that built their economic development strategies around attracting foreign automotive investment, have publicly urged the Trump administration to immediately negotiate a tariff suspension. Meanwhile, American suppliers that depend on German-owned factories for purchase orders face their own cascading uncertainty. One automotive supply chain analyst estimated that each major German automotive assembly plant closure would trigger indirect job losses of 4 to 6 American workers for every one direct German employed worker. Second, massive implications for the broader investment climate. The question that every sovereign wealth fund, every Japanese manufacturer, every South Korean conglomerate, every Canadian pension fund currently invested in American physical assets is now quietly asking is, if Germany, America's most economically significant ally, with 80 years of post-war partnership, can be subjected to coordinated regulatory targeting, who is safe? The American economy depends on foreign direct investment flows that average $350 billion per year. If the risk premium on American investment rises by even a fraction of a percentage point because of perceived political instability in the regulatory environment, the economic cost to American workers is measured in hundreds of thousands of jobs annually. Finally, institutional implications that will reshape the transatlantic alliance for decades. Germany is not just withdrawing capital. Germany is publicly documenting its reasons, filing them with its own government, sharing the underlying evidence with European partners, and essentially building an evidentiary record for WTO dispute resolution. The European Union's Trade Commissioner has already signaled that the EU will formally evaluate whether to pursue coordinated trade litigation against the United States on behalf of all 27 member states. If that litigation proceeds, the United States faces not just German withdrawal, but a potential restructuring of every trade relationship it holds with the world's largest trading bloc. Drop a comment below with your thoughts. I'm genuinely curious to see your perspective. But beyond the immediate economic fallout, this represents a test of whether the United States can maintain the economic alliances it has built over the post-war era. The architects of American post-war economic strategy, from Marshall Plan administrators to the negotiators of GATT and the WTO, built a system premised on the idea that open markets, rule-based trade, and stable regulatory environments made both the United States and its partners richer and more secure. If a president can dismantle that system using regulatory enforcement as a covert trade weapon, treating allied investment as economic hostages, then every future president of either party will inherit an America that other nations have learned they cannot trust as an economic partner. That isn't a trade negotiation win. That is a permanent reduction in American economic power. This scenario is causing absolute pandemonium inside the U.S. Treasury Department, the Commerce Department, and the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative. Reports indicate that senior officials at all three agencies have been in nearly continuous emergency sessions since February 18th, attempting to construct a response that de-escalates the German withdrawal without appearing to capitulate to what the White House has publicly characterized as economic coercion. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reportedly convened back-to-back sessions with economic advisors over the weekend of February 22nd, attempting to model the actual job losses attributable to a full German corporate withdrawal. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick faces an impossible choice: acknowledge that the regulatory actions against German subsidiaries were inappropriate, which directly undermines the administration's broader tariff narrative, or defend them as legitimate enforcement, which accelerates German corporate decision-making toward full withdrawal. Meanwhile, at the White House, Trump reportedly met with trade advisors for 6 consecutive hours on February 20th. The administration's early public statements characterized Germany's withdrawal announcement as economic blackmail and claimed the German government was acting on behalf of globalist interests seeking to prevent American manufacturing independence. But economic analysts noted that the administration's statements conspicuously failed to address the documented 47-instance regulatory targeting pattern, focusing instead on general assertions about American economic strength. But polling conducted after the German announcement shows that 67% of Americans, including 41% of Republicans, believe the administration should immediately negotiate with Germany to prevent the factory closures. In manufacturing-heavy swing states, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, the numbers are more stark. 73% of likely voters in those states told pollsters they were concerned about the potential job losses, and 59% said they believed the administration's trade policies needed to change. Stay with me because what comes next will completely change your understanding of where this leads. Here's what makes the Trump administration's position so precarious and its response so strategically disastrous. By publicly characterizing Germany's withdrawal announcement as economic blackmail and refusing to acknowledge the documented regulatory targeting pattern, the administration is alienating the very German corporate leaders whose reversal it needs to prevent mass American job losses. The German corporate community had, until February 18th, maintained internal divisions between executives who favored accommodation and those who favored withdrawal. The administration's aggressive public response, rather than creating pressure for German corporate capitulation, has effectively unified previously divided German corporate opinion around withdrawal. Political economists immediately identified this as a strategic catastrophe. Dr. Adam Posen, president of the Peterson Institute for International Economics in Washington, stated publicly, "The administration is responding to a credible economic threat as if it were a political attack to be rhetorically defeated rather than an economic problem to be substantively solved."
Every aggressive statement from Washington makes it politically harder for German corporate leaders to reverse course, because reversing course now means appearing to have capitulated to American pressure. The administration is guaranteeing the outcome it claims to want to prevent. Heather Conley, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs and now Senior Fellow at the German Marshall Fund, observed that the administration's pattern is consistent with a fundamental misreading of how German industrial decision-making works. German corporations do not respond to rhetorical pressure. They respond to economic analysis and regulatory certainty. By attacking Germany's motives rather than addressing Germany's documented concerns, the administration is not applying leverage. It is removing the last incentive German corporate boards had to slow the withdrawal process and seek negotiated resolution. This goes far beyond one trade dispute or one presidential term. It's about whether the United States can maintain the investment destination credibility that has sustained American manufacturing employment for 3 generations.
If a president can deploy the regulatory state as a covert trade weapon against allied investment without facing consequence, then every future president of either party has a new and extraordinarily powerful tool to punish economic partners who resist American demands. A tool that, once used, permanently raises the risk premium that all foreign investors assign to American-held physical assets. If this blows your mind, hit that like button right now. Here's the current situation. 23 major German corporations have formally initiated withdrawal of $200 billion in U.S. investment based on documented evidence of selective regulatory targeting and 35% tariffs. Germany's government has publicly supported the withdrawal and is building an evidentiary record for potential WTO litigation. 720,000 American workers in manufacturing-dependent states face direct job risk within a 90-day window. And the Trump administration's response, characterizing the withdrawal as blackmail and refusing to address the documented regulatory targeting, appears to be accelerating rather than preventing the withdrawal. This isn't trade negotiation theater or routine diplomatic friction. This is the closest the United States has come to a self-inflicted rupture of its core economic alliance since the Smoot-Hawley tariffs triggered the retaliatory spiral that deepened the Great Depression. When Germany's top industrial executives, people who spent careers building factories in Ohio and Tennessee, simultaneously declare American investment indefensible. When documented evidence of coordinated regulatory targeting runs to 47 separate incidents across 18 months. When governors of Republican manufacturing states publicly beg a Republican president to reverse course to save American jobs, the economic system is being tested in ways it hasn't been since the post-war order was constructed. Keep an extremely close eye on this story because the 90-day corporate review clock Germany announced will determine the fate of hundreds of thousands of American manufacturing jobs. German corporate boards will begin finalizing closure and withdrawal decisions within weeks. State economic development offices are already in emergency contact with German corporate leadership. The Trump administration will face a formal decision point. Substantively address the documented regulatory targeting concerns, which requires acknowledging conduct its public statements have denied, or hold firm on the current posture and accept the economic consequence of German corporate withdrawal. German Chancellor Merz has stated publicly that direct talks are possible if the United States is prepared to address the documented regulatory targeting patterns specifically, not as a general expression of trade partnership, but as a concrete withdrawal of the specific regulatory actions German companies have documented. Trump's response of characterizing Germany's withdrawal as blackmail makes that negotiated resolution less likely, not more, with each passing day. Before we go any further, smash that subscribe button so you never miss content like this, because this economic crisis is unfolding in real time and represents the most serious threat to American manufacturing employment and transatlantic economic alliance in the modern era. Here's where things stand right now. Germany's industrial establishment has formally initiated a $200 billion withdrawal from the American economy, supported by documented evidence of regulatory targeting that the Trump administration has refused to address substantively. 720,000 American workers face direct job risk. The administration's response is making the withdrawal more likely, not less. And the broader question of whether the United States can be trusted as a stable investment destination by its own allies now hangs directly over every international economic relationship America holds. This isn't a trade dispute that ends in a negotiated tariff reduction. This is a genuine test of whether the American economy can survive a president who treats allied investment as a hostage rather than as a strategic asset, and whether the consequences arrive fast enough to matter. The withdrawal has been formally announced. The 90-day clock is running, and the nation watches to see if the constitutional and economic system designed to check exactly this type of self-destructive policy will function as intended before the damage becomes permanent. The stakes have never been higher for America's position as the world's preferred destination for productive foreign investment. The evidence has never been more concrete or more meticulously documented, and the economic crisis has never been more immediate or more preventable, if the political will to prevent it exists. Pause for a second and hit that like button if you're finding value in this coverage.